Good morning and welcome to Africa edition of Dive In with Captain Sean. I have my intrepid explorer hat on, which I'm now going to take off because it's hot in my office. I actually turned up the temperature in my office so it would be Africa hot. Uh, anyway, we've got an exciting show for you today. We're going to jump right in. We've got a very special guest. We've got Will Jones from Journeys by Design. We'll bring him on in just a minute, but let's jump right in. So, first of all, I'd just like to say a big shout out to some of the people or some of the companies and people that really make Dive In with Captain Sean special or help my job as a charter manager and charter broker and as a captain. This is a great tool for anyone that is in the industry. Charter itinerary. If you need to create spectacular itineraries, this is a wonderful way to do that. And once you complete those itineraries, create those itineraries, they're stored nice and neat in your up online. You can share them. There's broker friendly versions. Anyway, Charter Itinerary, a great product. Really look forward to seeing them in Palm Beach in a couple of weeks. So we also have a featured vessel. Now, a lot of the tours and things that we're going to be discussing today are going to be inland, but you can still do Mozambique and Tanzania in conjunction with a yacht. And today's yacht is the motor yacht Asteria, a boat that I'm very familiar with. Asteria is a fantastic expedition vessel. Just this year, it's been to Svalbard. Excuse me, last year it was in Svalbard, then went all the way down to Antarctica, where she did the Antarctica Peninsula, the Falkland Islands, and now is heading to Tristan da Cunha via St. Helena and going to another island called Inaccessible Island. Yes, it's a real place, Inaccessible Island. We'll report back if they were able to access Inaccessible Island. But anyway, Asteria is a great boat for doing Africa. It's got a lot of toys, got that great tender, that north wind on the side. Anyway, if you want to know more about Asteria, contact me later. Today, we're going to be talking to Will Jones. He has a company called Journeys by Design. Their website is stunning, packed with wonderful, great information. Anything that you need to know about going to Africa, you can find on this website. And the founder of this company is Will Jones. He's been voted the best travel specialist by Condé Nast. He is in he's also Travel Leisure on their A list. Amazing guy. And today, very privileged to have him with me talking about Mozambique and Tanzania and maybe a few other things too. Anyway, welcome to the stage, Will Jones. Dr. Jones, I presume.
Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for having me, and very glad to be here.
I see you got your Indiana Jones hat in the background.
Yeah, no, that's right. In fact, that's my wife's. We've just driven up from my home in the Mara in southern Kenya. We've got a selection of hats to choose from.
Yeah. Not to be outdone. But anyway, so Will, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into this? I mean, you have a wonderful biography. There's great videos on you, but give us the short version of because we only have 55 minutes now. So.
Yeah, no, of course. Well, thanks for the opportunity. So my parents came out to Africa in the late 60s during the Biafran War. My father came out with the Red Cross. I was raised in 6 different African countries, originally Nigeria, then Ethiopia. My father set up the Relief and Rehabilitation Commission in Ethiopia when the old emperor was still alive. The old emperor was then taken over by Mengistu. We moved to a small mountain kingdom in South Africa called Lesotho. And then we moved to Kenya, went to school there, moved to Sudan. When we moved to Sudan, I was sent back to boarding school, trained as an environmental scientist in the UK. stumble into tourism, come back to Ethiopia, and work as a volunteer in national parks there. Get very deeply involved in community conservation and tourism. Trained as a wildlife guide. So basically my entire childhood was in Africa. And then I came back to the UK to marry a gal that I met at university in Southampton in the UK. We're still married. We have a home in the UK. We have a home in Kenya. I started Journeys by Design in 1999, 25 years ago now. And we're just a really small little team that just does privately guided private itineraries. We do between about 50 to 100 safaris a year between East and Southern Africa, and then increasingly into some more off-grid destinations around the continent now. But yeah, we're small, we're bespoke, we're traveling a lot. And I'm actually here in Kenya at the moment at a friend of mine's house en route to Lamu, which is an Indian Ocean island which you might with your boat one day, but it's very beautiful Arab Swahili town. And I'm on the road.
So the so now let's get into the meat of it. Will, again, your credentials are amazing. We're going to talk more about not just the trips that you do, but also what you do on those trips and how you give back. But let's talk about first, like, how does one get to Mozambique or Tanzania?
Sure. So if you're flying scheduled, would either be via Johannesburg into Mozambique. So you'd fly into Johannesburg. We would meet you on arrival, and we would fly you down private charter or schedule, depending on your budget, down into Mozambique. My guess is if you're chartering private boats, you might be in the private aircraft market. We've got, some lovely PC-12s and Cessna 208s, which we can fly people around. But to get down there are two main archipelagos in Mozambique, one up in the north called Carimbas, one in Bazaruto, which I know you wanted to talk about. And there's a small little town there called Vilanculos. So that's like an hour and a half flight from Johannesburg. So it's super easy. And then from Vilanculos, we can helicopter onto the boat or onto the islands. So pretty straightforward. If it's into Tanzania, you can fly straight into Kilimanjaro or Nairobi and hook into Tanzania that way. But either way, super easy. We meet you on arrival in the airports and, wing-to-wing transfers and that sort of thing. So logistics are our job, really, but relatively straightforward.
Now, what's the best time to travel? I mean, you're again, on your website, it's beautifully interactive. This actually, I pulled up from your website. You can actually click on the different areas, but specifically Mozambique and Tanzania.
Sure. So again, depending on whether we're going for Mozambique or Tanzania, we're covering about 2,000 kilometers of coastline there. So Mozambique, I would say best March through to September. That's the dry season. There's a part called Gorongosa, which I think you're going to flag up later, which is literally underwater from October to March. And then if it's Tanzania, same period, March to October, but you also have the December-January period, which is also great. We think of wet and dry rather than summer-winter. Temperature tends to stay broadly similar through the year. As you can see there, temperature stays broadly similar through the year. It's the rainfall that changes. So, have a chat with us. We can advise you on what bits to avoid. But April, May traditionally is pretty wet. And November can be pretty wet. You've got cyclone season in January, February in Mozambique, so you definitely want to avoid that.
We try to think about wet and dry on board the boats too, but I keep the wet part on the outside of the boat. But anyway, jump into one of the amazing destinations, which the Bazaruto Archipelago. It looks like there's some great diving there. I pulled up a little chartlet here. This is for those of you guys, captains watching this. This is a off Transis. Anyway, the anchorages seem to be just up in that northwest corner. Looks like you've got plenty of water up there, and then you can kind of get in, and you've got some good protection in and amongst those reefs. But I definitely would recommend like a I don't know. Do you know if there's a pilot in that area, or I'm sure you could arrange somebody with local knowledge to get. Asteria's got quite a deep draft to be safe to get in there. You'd want to either scout it. If I didn't have a local pilot, I would get someone to scout that ahead of time for me. But you could probably arrange that.
Definitely. The marine park's managed by a conservation organization called African Parks. It's their only marine national park, and there are 15 guides in the world which they afford access to to their conservation adventure and travel assets. I happen to be one of those 15 guides. So we can work with African Parks and not only get all that inside information, but we can get some really interesting sort of behind the scenes conservation work that they're doing on 5 Mile Reef, which is an awesome diving site just off Benguera Island, which is what you're looking at in the middle of the screen there, and some awesome accommodation if you wanted to spend a night in a beach camp on one of the beaches. There's some very pretty beach camps there, Kisawa for one, or Azura, or Benguera Island Lodge. So yeah, we can help you with all of that for sure, Sean.
Now, Vilanculos that's Portuguese. So these were all Portuguese colonies back in the day, or?
Yeah, so Mozambique was a Portuguese colony. Vasco da Gama, the early sort of Portuguese sailors, obviously great maritime experts, sailed into Mozambique in 1490. I mean, so it really puts the history into perspective there, doesn't it? But yeah, Portuguese until 1975, when they were all asked to leave in 48 hours. There's some extraordinary towns where they've gone from, like, so the Portuguese were trading with India, obviously, as well. And so Mozambique was a very, very significant stopping point on the way to India. And so you had some very significant Portuguese, Indian, Mozambique communities. These populations were then decimated in 1975. And you fast forward like 40, 50 years, and these towns have literally sort of fallen into the sea. There's some very slightly haunting, but very beautiful old Portuguese Arab architecture on some of these little islands. There's one called Ibo, where it's now got rock splitter figs in the facades of the building. And it's an extraordinary place, and a number of these Portuguese forts that they built along that eastern coast as they sailed up north. So yeah, really interesting history. So it's not just about the ocean, it's about culture, it's about people, it's about history, plus the opportunity to get involved with some mainland safari stuff too.
Now this is pretty cool. As I was looking at the chart going over this, this was like an atoll in the middle of the middle, about approximately 241 miles and a due east, and it was a reef. Give you a little. It's Bassa de India, which it's owned by the French now. The Portuguese knew about it. It just looks fascinating. There's a couple of pictures. If you go online and go do Bassa de India, you'll see there's that's all one giant beach around it, but inside that lagoon looks interesting. And if you notice on the lower left-hand corner, there's a little pin there that's marked Santiago. And that was a Portuguese ship that hit that in the middle of the night in 1585. They were actually looking for, Portuguese would use that as kind of a navigational beacon. They would know where they were when they found it. Well, anyway, they found it, but not exactly in the way they wanted to. This was a 150-foot, 50-meter sailing craft with between 450 and 500 people on board the boat. It must have been some tight quarters there. There's a story about how they went back to mainland Africa. It didn't end well for a lot of the people on board that boat. But in 1977, there was a sailor. He was sailing from Thailand with his family, discovered the wreck, took some artifacts, and they did another expedition in 1980. And a lot of those artifacts can be found in the Portuguese National Museum, which is a lot of it was returned to. But anyway, just kind of neat little destination. Just looking around, it looks like there'd be some amazing fishing and diving, and it's not that far. I mean, if it's about it's a day's cruise from the mainland. But anyway, back to the mainland. Tell us about this. Well,
Yeah, so this is Gorongosa National Park. I mean, Mozambique doesn't have a ton of wildlife because it lost a lot of its wildlife. There are two main parks. One of them is Gorongosa in the south, and then one called Nyasa up in the north. But this is a fantastic option to combine with the Bazaruto archipelago. It's an extraordinary project, funded in fact by an American philanthropist called Greg Carr. Gorongosa used to be more popular than Kruger National Park. If anyone knows South Africa,
really?
you'll appreciate how popular Kruger is. But yeah, Gorongosa was more popular than Kruger National Park in its heyday when the South Africans would come down into Mozambique. But lots of elephant, lots of lion, lots of waterbuck, lots of African hunting dog. It's a very remote park. So if you like unique, novel access with very, very few other visitors, Gorongosa is perfect. There are a couple of really nice little camps that have literally only just opened up, actually. There used to be a camp a long time ago called Explore Gorongosa. That fell into disrepair. They've just opened up. So again, Greg Carr putting a lot of finance into the infrastructure in the park. Links really nicely with the coastline, and we can fly you. You could either take the helicopter, or we can charter a local helicopter, or fly in a fixed wing. But yeah, for 3 days there, 3 days in Bazaruto, best part of a week. That's a really nice combination. Would really recommend it. So
Now,
this is
I
a
know
place
that.
of yeah.
Now I know
Right.
we're jumping kind of geographically. We're kind of jumping around a bit, but the but tell us about this. Is again, all these places can be found on your website, and you give. I don't want to say you give away such great information because you're not. I don't think you're giving anything away. It's like you're really showcasing it. But tell us about this. Now, I just know that the only thing I know about Greystoke is obviously the Tarzan reference. So,
Yeah. So I included this one because it's a really unique, rather unusual, non megafauna itinerary. In fact, so it's focused on chimpanzees. It's on Lake Tanganyika, and there's these sugar white beaches with this primary rainforest that comes down to this crystal clear. It holds like a third of the world's fresh water. It's like the deepest lake in the world, with some of our closest cousins living in that forest. Very difficult to access. But once you're there, it's an extraordinary immersion into primary rainforest, spending time tracking these chimpanzees, which could be anywhere up in what's called the Mahale Mountains. So, and the style of the accommodation, we can do 7-star luxury, but we also like stuff that's got a lot of character. So this is more like Robinson Crusoe, Castaway 5-star. Happened to be being built by a friend of mine called Roland Purcell, who's a very, very old friend of mine. It was one of the very first camps. In fact, it was the first camp built in Mahale. There are only 2 camps in Mahale, but this is a real spirit of adventure and originality. You've got to be relatively fit because those chimps can move around and they don't operate according to our timetables, of course. But depending on different times of the year, when the fruits are fruiting in different trees, we can ascertain where they might be on the gradient of those mountains. But this is a really, really awesome camp to combine with your more classic wildlife safari like we're looking at in Gorongosa. But yeah, lovely camp, a lot of character. Yeah, highly recommend it.
yeah, it sounds amazing. So, one thing that caught there's a third of the world's fresh water in that particular lake.
I believe so. Yeah, I would probably want to go back and check that. But yeah, it is the deepest Rift Valley lake, and I believe it holds about a third of the world's fresh water. Let's do a fact check on that and share it with the viewers later on. But yeah, it's a very significant.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Tell us about this.
Yeah, so this is actually where I mentioned Vasco da Gama and the Portuguese who sailed into a place called Ilha de Mozambique, further up the Mozambique coast. It's a really interesting. You can see the causeway, that little strip of running onto the island in the middle of the bay there. But it's a very, very interesting old town. It used to be the Portuguese administrative capital for Goa. So lots of big silversmiths. They were running India from this tiny little island. And so the infrastructure and the buildings there are absolutely sensational. So if you were to start down in Bazaruto in the south, You would sail up north. Here's one of those Portuguese forts that I was telling you about earlier. So absolutely fascinating history and beautiful beaches. The condition of the water in Mozambique and the condition by and large of the reefs in Mozambique, because Mozambique's not that well visited, so and relatively undeveloped. So the condition of the reefs, because the fishermen aren't sort of trawling it in the same way. So the quality of the water and the quality of the beaches here, the humpback whales coming in. There's a little camp called Nuaro just north of this, where you can literally swim straight off the beach, and within about 100 meters you hit the shelf and you can go out swimming into some extraordinary deep water. But beautiful coral, beautiful coastline. But like I say, the history is really important. And Ilha do Mozambique, no one's really ever even heard of it. It's a very unusual little town worth visiting. If you've got a boat, then I'd definitely stop in and check this place out.
Yeah, it looks that. I mean, my eyes when I look at it, I'm like, okay, is this going to be a safe place to base the vessel? And I look at safety from not just physical security, but also, is this a good anchorage? Is this someplace that we could hide into? Is the holding going to be good? And are we able to get passengers on and off in a safe way? And this one ticked all the boxes. I mean, this has been a safe harbor for, like you said, for centuries. And it's got a great anchorage that's really, really well sheltered. Looks like there's very, very good holding. And it looks like there's a lot of interesting things to do in and around that whole area.
Definitely. And just one thing worth mentioning, which I'm not sure I've made clear. The majority of our trips are privately guided. So someone like myself or someone in our exploration team, I would suggest, would be joining you on the boat to be the interface between the boat crew and the mainland crew. So you would be privately guided, and the private guide would be an essential component to helping you unlock the access to the different experiences and the stories.
Yeah, that's honestly, we'll get to your team. We'll get to your team in a minute, but it's like the people that you have around you and your contacts to do it without someone like yourself, you'd be missing so much. Part of the things that I was doing in this show, like when I'm in the Arctic, I'm with with Jason Roberts up in Svalbard. Without him, our experience, and out him and his guides, our experience wouldn't nearly have been as good. Other guides that we've used all over the world, we've used EOST in Antarctica. They did a phenomenal job for the charter that we just had on board Asteria. Without local knowledge and without people like yourselves, you miss out on so much stuff. So tell us about this.
Yeah, so this is Jabali Ridge. It's owned by a portfolio called Asilia, and it's in a park called Ruaha. So this is actually southern Tanzania. So we might have sort of sailed past Ilha de Mozambique. We've now come up into the sort of southern Tanzanian coast, and we're now looking at sort of southern Tanzania. Ruaha is probably one of the more interesting, exciting parks in Africa at the moment. There are challenges with over-tourism in different areas, which we need to be aware of. Ruaha is still relatively undeveloped. Wildlife populations are fantastic, so relatively little visited, but some really lovely little camps. Jabali Ridge is a particularly lovely camp. I'd put it in sort of a 5-star tented camp category, and it links very neatly with the chimpanzees that you saw earlier as well. So you might come off the boat into Ruaha, spend maybe 3 or 4 nights in Ruaha. If you like walking, by the way, Ruaha is also perfect. We can go and sleep out under the stars and then come back to the main camp. There's also a private house there called Jabali Private, I think it's called, but that's also a fantastic private home if you're a family, and if you want privacy, we can get private safari villas, or these small camps can often be booked exclusively. They might have 6 tents or 8 tents, but if you want exclusivity and privacy, these are small camps which are ideal for taking over in their entirety, and then we could hop over to the chimpanzees from there. So that little itinerary, that little combination works really well. Ruaha's fantastic. And best again March through to September, which links in with the Mozambique weather period too. So again, March to September, great time to be doing all of this stuff.
So tell us. So one of the questions again we that I frequently get, especially when cruising in remote areas, is security, and especially this being the east coast of Africa. Tell me a little bit about how you handle those concerns.
Sure. Good question. In terms of when it comes to wildlife, I'll start with wildlife security. By and large, it's fine. There is, of course, a greater risk when operating with wildlife, and there are some very basic rules that you need to follow. Obviously, having a good private guide, first of all, won't walk you into a situation. And really, the one main bit of advice that we give, particularly with families, is that, after dark, when wildlife is most active, there's no running around after dark or running between the tents or messing around at night. We take nighttime very, very seriously, and it's a basic common sense rule. So we have a risk management team that we get advice on sort of broader geopolitical risk. We have, when you arrive in country, we have sort of VIP airport handling, so you're escorted straight from the aircraft straight onto your own waiting private charter. I'd say 90% of our trips include private charter aircraft, and then you're flying into these remote locations. So I think the remoteness and the wildness aspect of these camps and lodges ensures sort of security. You're a long way from anywhere. Of course, Africa has its problems. I'd say every country that we operate in Africa has its problems and areas we wouldn't recommend you travel to. But that's always been the case, and that's why you want to work with a specialist like ours, who's got a lot of experience, to be able to advise you on where to go and where not to go. But by and large, it's basically common sense. If things do heat up, we are the first people to know, and obviously we're in very close contact with you as the client. So the communication is clean, and again, working with a private guide is always nice because he or she can help plan the route as it goes along, and if there is anything that sort of pops up along the way, they're able to sort of manage the path accordingly. So, but by and large, these are safe itineraries. We're not going to put anybody in harm's way.
Yeah, I always, when we were in the higher latitudes, polar bears were always a concern. But again, if you're smart about it and you're aware of just how fast these bears are and how aggressive that they can be, and don't put yourself in a situation where I really looked at it as really putting the wildlife at risk when you're getting close to them, because you might have to you're putting yourself in a situation where it's not going to end well for the wildlife, and that's a shame. That's something that I would never want to do. And the 3 years that I spent up there, we really made a really concerted effort as understanding that we're in their home, not the other way around.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Worth mentioning that we have included in anything that you do with us, we have emergency sort of backup systems, and we've got air ambulances and aircraft and nurses on standby 24/7 in the very unlikely event of something happening. We've actually only ever had to use it once in 25 years of operating the business, and that was because someone had a little bit too much to drink on a New Year's evening and slipped down some steps. So nothing wildlife related. But nice to know it's there anyway.
Drew, now this picture, we're getting back into the mountain gorillas at this place.
Yep. So this is Singita Quitonda. Some of you, I don't know if you've been following Africa or interested in Africa, you'll probably be aware that Singita is a premium 7-star luxury brand, I think, by which all others measure themselves. They really set the standard. Anyway, this is their property up in Parc de Volcan in Rwanda on the Uganda border, home to 800 mountain gorilla and the hills you see in the background there. And that makes for a very, very nice end to a safari in, let's say, Tanzania. You would start on your safari in Tanzania, and then you would just hop over Lake Victoria into Kigali, and then it's literally a 3-hour drive. We can helicopter up if you want, but it's very pretty 3-hour drive up into the hills. Need to be relatively fit because you can be out for up to like 8 hours out in the hills. I'd say 99% chance of seeing mountain gorilla because they are habituated wild. But this is a very, very pretty lodge. It is extremely well run. There are a number of other properties in Rwanda that you could potentially link the gorillas in with, but finishing here for 3 nights, and we say 3 nights because you want to do gorilla trekking for at least 2 days. Your first day is like you're just blown away. You can hardly process the information of being in front of a creature of this size that you're on your phone. You're just, and so we always recommend coming in and visiting another family the next day and just taking slightly more sort of meditative, being in the present moment time with these gorillas. Two things worth mentioning is that we can do private gorilla treks. We can walk straight out of this lodge with a gorilla guide. So we can do private gorilla treks into the mountains, so you don't need to link in with anybody else. Group sizes are limited to 8 anyway, so it's not like you're in a big group, but something nice about doing it privately. And we also have a relationship with gorilla doctors. We run a not-for-profit called Wild Philanthropy, and because of the support that we give to some of the gorilla vets, they give us this opportunity to spend time with the vets. And the vets will take us out there, and we'll do these habituation days where we learn more about the work of the vets and the life of gorillas, and that's really, really cool. So that sort of special access stuff is sort of one of the reasons why I think you should work with a company like ours, because of our network, because of our database, because of the amount that we put back into conservation. So little tidbits like that, I think, in terms of special access, are relevant here.
Well, that's the perfect segue into the types of safaris that we're going to talk about now, which is you have a tab on your website called Rare and Off the Map, and one of the safaris that you had listed on there was actually, this was in the Red Sea with this particular group of people. Now, Dalek.
Correct. It's the Dahlak archipelago.
And tell us a little bit. I mean, we're getting a little bit. We're way north now, but the reason I'm asking you this is that you can also put together anywhere on the African continent. If some people do want to see something extraordinary or something extraordinarily rare, that you are the guy to talk to do that.
Yep. We are a wilderness frontier operator.
And by the way, we're at North Avenue. We're offering this boat for charter. If anyone's interested.
It looks good. This is the Dahlak archipelago. Like Sean says, it's just an example of we like being at our appropriate edges. The classic safari is very much our bread and butter, but actually what really exposes the rawness of our hearts and our emotions and our passions are very much in these frontiers where we are exploring. We're exploring in the true sense of the word. So in fact, this picture you're looking at here are the Dinka in South Sudan. We've just operated a helicopter trip around South Sudan where they have just discovered, and it's quite extraordinary, you may well have already heard about it, but the single largest mammal migration in the world has been operating off our radar for forever. They've discovered that there are 6 million white-eared cob migrating in a park called Boma, about a stone's throw from where this Dinka cattle camp is in South Sudan. I just use that as an example. We're the only company in the world that had exclusive access to Boma National Park and this migration last year because of the work and the relationships we have with some of the conservation organizations. So there is an awesomeness still to be explored. The classic, the 7-star, the luxury, that's wonderful as well. But this is the new luxury. This is about space. This is originality. This is novelty. It's all privately guided. There will be maybe, I reckon there will be 15 commercial or paying guests to South Sudan this entire year. So you put that in perspective of, a Dubrovnik or whatever. This is where the value of specialist travel really comes into shape. And you can link this rare stuff with the classic stuff as well. So it doesn't all have to be crazy frontier stuff, but these are important destinations. So Chad, South Sudan, Republic of Congo. We're doing a lot of stuff in the Congo. Most people go, "My God, that sounds crazy." Most people must think we're crazy being in Sudan, but we obviously are doing our due diligence, and we're only doing it based on the experiences that we have. So, well worth exploring further. Ethiopia is a big destination for us too. So, well, if you're interested, yeah,
I think that part of the reason that you're let into these areas, and again, a lot of the reason that I was led into some of the areas that I was led into, is that a key part of this is a quote from your website, is the key part of the rare safari is the positive impact it has on the destination and the wider environment. And something that I've always said to my crew is, no matter where we were, we tried to make the little island that we were on a little better, whether that was a plastic cleanup or whether the natives needed medical supplies or something. It's like, how do we have a positive impact on the environment and the people that are in those areas? And this is just, again, this is from your website, but explain, just tell us about this. I mean, this is something that you've actually done to give back to give back.
Yeah, no, thank you. So we actually ran a sort of impact traveler program that would travel with us specifically to raise funds, so donor travel, if you like, to support a range of different ecosystems. So these are the impacts that Journeys by Design are starting to measure as a business for good, and we're keen to keep working on these metrics because we think it's absolutely essential that we're all stakeholders in this journey of life and protecting the environment, which is our home. So we're really, really keen to engage the traveler as an enlightened individual who can come home and tell their friends. Only 8% of global fundraising is earmarked for the environment, which is an extraordinary statistic when you consider.
That's a frightening number.
It is. And of that, a relatively small percentage is put into these sort of these remoter parks and reserves. So it's a real challenge. So we're always looking for enlightened travelers. In parallel, we also have wild philanthropy, which I know you were aware of, Sean. I'm an environmental scientist, and we started this 501c3. We distribute about $250,000 as well on top of what you're looking at here through our 501c3, which is ad hoc donations from our clients. And an agreed percentage of that, 2% of our turnover every year, is used to feed into this charity that supports these programs. But yeah, it's essential. Without that sort of support, we wouldn't have an asset which the industry depends upon. So, we're committed to that.
Now, I personally like my safaris with malaria. So but that is a concern with obviously people traveling to these particular areas. I dealt with it in the South Pacific. Obviously, if you're closer to the coast, you're going to be closer to mangroves, you're going to be closer to malaria. But I was able to operate in the South Pacific in very remote islands that were rife with malaria and never had we had one, and we told him, do not go. And he didn't listen, and he wound up getting malaria. But anyway, for the most part. But tell us about this, if you have people that
sure.
are concerned.
Yeah, so for families looking for malaria-free safaris, South Africa's great for malaria-free. There's a lovely little park called Marataba, which I just came back from. Beautiful little park up in the highlands there. So broadly speaking, when you're up in the highlands, lower risk of malaria. When you're down along the coast, higher risk of malaria. Central Highlands of Kenya, also very good, very low risk. The challenge, of course, being on a boat and at coastal level are the presence of mosquitoes. But if you're out on a boat and there's a breeze, again, the chance of a mosquito having bitten someone in a village who had malaria and then drifting a kilometer offshore to end up is very, very unlikely. But to be triple sure, there is something called Malarone. It's very inert. There's something called Malarone pediatric as well for kids. So, you just take that, wear long sleeves in the evenings, wear some long pants in the evenings, put a little bit of jungle juice on. The one mosquito you need to be wary of is the female Anopheles, but she's a very late bird. She doesn't tend to get up at about 11 at night, goes to bed about 5 in the morning. So unless you're having a late night, one tends to be fairly well tucked into bed at the point at which she's operating. But yeah, there are malaria-free options. And there are ways to de-risk your exposure to malaria, I'd say by 100% pretty much, if you're taking your doctor's advice.
I agree with that. Now, these are some of the luxury accommodations that you're talking about.
I know. Seems pretty nuts, doesn't it? But yeah,
tell us about this.
Yeah.
It doesn't look very,
No, that's right. So we took this is the northern deserts of Chad in a cultural and wilderness reserve called the Enedi. And actually, this is a picture we took on with the Condé Nast Traveler magazine. I hosted the trip in last November. We actually had the front cover of Condé Nast in the US in August, and then it's been on about 6 different front covers around the world. So there's clearly an appetite for something different. And yeah, we set up these super simple fly camps, we call them, super lightweight camps out in the desert. There is to the left a main mess and a kitchen and the vehicles and all. So there is, of course, much more to the camp than just that. But, sleeping under the stars, it's awesome. And then you link it in with something more comfortable, and then you spill really gratefully into the comfort, and you appreciate the luxury that you've got. When you get back to your boat, you're going to be going, oh my God, isn't this extraordinary? Precisely because you've gone to that appropriate edge very safely. And it's all, we're not taking any risks, but it is special. And if the wind picks up, or if you want somewhere to go and change, we set up separate toilet and shower tents, and there is a tent we can zip up if you want to go inside and sleep under that if you're feeling uncomfortable for whatever reason. And it's all private, so you're not mixing in with anybody else. So it's just you, or you and your family, or you and your buddies. So there's no awkwardness about privacy, really. We do a lot of helicopter stuff. Do you want me to just carry on talking about that?
Yeah,
Sean,
go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. This is actually northern Kenya, deserts of northern Kenya. That's a freshwater spring up near the Chalbi Desert in the Suguta Valley. So we helped pioneer these helicopters. That's the H-130, the B-4, which we fly up into the northern deserts there. There are some H-125s, B-3s that we also fly up there. But this is extraordinary. State-of-the-art machines flying in some of the most savagely beautiful and inhospitable climates in the world. And there are cultures and communities that live in these landscapes that we have the privilege of being able to interact with as well in a respectful fashion. So we can unlock experiences and geographies that you just can't without a helicopter. So it's a bit like skiing. You can sort of go down that valley or land on that, and we'll take picnic breakfast with us, and we'll do multi-day trips with this helicopter. So we'll do 3 days of flying with this, going A to B to C, visiting all the different sort of like really remote off-grid stuff, and it's a hell of a lot of fun.
Yeah, you sent me a lot of the videos that I watched that you sent me were revolved around the helicopters, and again, some of the funnest moments that I had up in the Arctic were all like helo rides. We took a helicopter in Iceland one time and landed on top of a volcano, or we're flying through ice fields up in Greenland and everything. And the helicopters are just such game changers, much in the same way that drone photography has become such a game changer. But now imagine yourself, if you've never flown in a helicopter, you are in that drone and you're able to see the same things from that point of view. But yeah, the helicopters are just a great way to see these wild landscapes. Now, tell us a little bit about this.
Yeah, something different. This is again southern Tanzania. It's a very pretty lodge built by a guy called Richard Bonham on the Rufiji River, which is full of hippo and crocodiles. And there's the walking from here is fantastic. So I think I really put this in to highlight The opportunity for walking, so getting out of vehicles, getting off the boat, getting out of the helicopter, and feeling Africa through your boots. Walking along the banks of the Rufiji River. Again, we set up these simple little fly camps where you can go and sleep out under the stars as well. But great exercise. If there is a criticism of being on safari, is that they feed you too much and you're often in a vehicle for too long, so it's hard to get that all-important sort of heart-pumping activity exercise. A lot of places have gyms and that sort of stuff, but the longer we walk, the happier we get. I'm convinced of that. And there's some fantastic walking that goes on here as well. So if you're active and you want to get outdoors very safely, again with good guides, Sand River is an awesome place to do.
When you were in your place yesterday, when I was talking to you, you're like, "Oh, there's hippos and crocodiles." You turned the camera around, and there they were.
Yeah, no, that's right. We have a family of about 40 hippo and 2 massive crocodile in our body of water down in the Mora. Yeah, that's the Rufiji River. Beautiful spot, very close to Dar es Salaam actually. So actually, logistically speaking, if you wanted to do just one safari from the boat, this is your nearest part, and you can literally be in there within an hour.
And tell us about this one.
Yeah, so again, Singita brand. This is a private concession up on the what's called the western corridor of the Serengeti. So the wildebeest migration. So this is in here because of the wildebeest migration, and that's coming up through this area in sort of June, July time. Wildlife there is fantastic all year round, but this is a very, very pretty little camp on this private concession bordering the Serengeti. So if you're looking for like 7-star accommodation that's consistent with your boat and service and wildlife and privacy, because it's privately controlled, the number of vehicles are strictly controlled on this conservancy, then I don't think you can get much better than Singita Farofaro. And that's a perfect stop before going to the gorillas. So you could go your boat, you could come up here to see the wildebeest migration, and then you're literally about an hour from Kigali and the mountain gorillas.
I think I'm sold.
Yeah,
and of course the ubiquitous balloon safari too. So that was the.
Yeah, we can include that in most places. Tends to be a fairly early start. So if you're happy getting up at 4 a.m. For a 6 a.m. Sunrise ride, it's worth doing.
Now, one of the first thing that I like to do is, like, when I'm working with people, is like, all right, who do they work with? And your team just looks great. I was been reading about. I read everybody's. I'm not going to go through everyone's bio in here. Kyle was just, he caught my eye just because of some of the photographs that he did. This one of the lions, and of course this one of that's a baby gorilla, or?
I think, yes, it is. And I think it's in a park called Odzala in the Congo. Yeah, one of Carl's awesome photographer, extraordinary pro guide, and Squack as well, awesome pro guide. We're very, very lucky to be working with these guys.
And then the rest of you people on here too. And they've all got great bios. They're just fun. So many times I read bios and I'm like, but they all look great. and the one that I really resonated was Angela, and we talked about her. She the tribute that you wrote for her was probably the single thing that I resonated the most with you and your philosophy. And I'm just gonna read what you said, because I want to be clear that meaningfulness wasn't simply selling safaris. If that were the case, then she would have sought more purposeful pastures years ago. On the contrary, Angela was selling experiences designed to change lives, and not just for the short term. And for her, the words client, supplier, or host were inadequate descriptions of the depth of relationships she constantly curried in the name of making the world a better place. For me, the source of all this care, creativity, and bravery is no mystery. Angela was, at the heart, an artist. She saw the world as a place of great beauty, which she once expressed as a painter and latterly as a photographer. She understood nature for what it is, raw, original, necessary. This is the beauty that she worked so hard to conserve And that's why she threw herself into our charitable work and into everything related to wild philanthropy. It's why she became the master designer of the conservation journey, and that's beautiful. And it, it it's why I do what I did. It was a talk that I gave. I've given it a couple of times. The perfect customer journey. It's that if you can change people's lives and change their outlook, and then show them an environment worth saving, and they go back into their world to do that in small parts, that's great. But when you do that to the 1% of the 1%, people that actually really have their fingers on the pulse of industry and can make massive changes in the world, then you've done something extraordinary. And I believe that since 1999, that's what you've been doing, Will. And you should be very proud of the company that you've founded, and the people that work with you are reflections of that.
Thank you.
On that note, tell us about Africa House.
So Africa House is because we had the for-profit journeys by design, and thought, well, gosh, we're going to have to start the not-for-profit to support the asset on which the for-profit depends on, and we started Wild Philanthropy, and then we also thought, gosh, well, I had this extraordinary opportunity to get involved in business opportunities in Ethiopia to support remote, rural, vulnerable river communities in the Omo Valley that were affected by upstream dams, and all their seasonal flood crop irrigation had been massively impacted. So we went into impact investment as well. And we had all of these things. It's like, well, how do we pull it all together? How do we try and make sense of the for-profit, the not-for-profit, the impact investment vehicle? And so we decided to bring it under one house called Africa House. And it's a complex arrangement. It's not straightforward, but then life is complex. And I think we're trying to sort of engage with the complexity and hopefully the intelligence and wisdom that there is this sort of circular flow between being able to harness the spending power of individuals that have an interest in traveling to Africa, cycling it into wild philanthropy that supports that asset, the communities, the wildlife, but also are really into this idea of sustainable trade as opposed to aid. Aid sort of disempowers and disenfranchises by and large. Of course, it's very, very important in critical zones, but sustainable trade, providing jobs, having a respectful relationship with local communities primarily through business, is something that's also really important to us. So we had Tukula capital. Tukula means wolf in Amharic, which is so Ethiopia is a very, very big part of my background. And so we create jobs in very vulnerable groups. There's a group called the Kara in the Omo Valley. There are only 2,000 Kara left in the world. In fact, I'm wearing one of their bracelets here, and they actually still practice infanticide. Obviously it's abhorrent to us that they do, but I'm just using it to illustrate how traditional and remote some of our downstream impacts and influences are to support very, very vulnerable, marginalized communities through tourism and through the revenue that you can help us generate through travel to the continent.
Well, we could do a whole show just on that. This I throw out this shameless plug for donations, but anyway, I really, and something that I generally don't do, but I'm going to do it, is that if anyone wants to donate, you can go onto the website, or you can email info@wildphilanthropy.com, and you
Thank you.
donate to this. And I love the fact that it actually is going to the people that need it. And you're not just giving, and again, you're not just giving aid, you're giving opportunity. And that's a big difference. It's like I've seen the difference again in some of the places that where if just aid is given, it actually destroys communities because they have no incentive to keep doing what they're doing. Whereas if you give them incentive to keep doing what they're doing, their traditions survive, their children become better educated, and they're able to go into the world and bring the best parts of their cultures into that world, and then bring them back into their communities to help them evolve into the future. And I think that is a big part of what you're doing.
Thank you. No, appreciate it. It's an important journey. It's not an easy one, but I suppose we're all trying to do what we can and give according to our ability. And just so everybody knows, the operating costs for Wild Philanthropy are 100% underwritten by Journeys by Design. So 100% of your donation will hit the target project. If you want to specifically choose a project or make it unrestricted, entirely up to you. But yeah, so Journeys by Design underwrites all the operating costs.
Now, this was not a shameless like when I originally asked Will, he never mentioned his charity to me. This is something that I discovered on my own. It wasn't mentioned. It was it wasn't like, hey, can I come on and and do a plug? It's no. It's just that he has his foundation is worth actually investing in. Anyway, on that note, anybody out there? Does anybody out there in television land have any questions? Like that, we got one from Judith, and yeah, she goes, "Can we have a record of this presentation? As soon as we don't go live, this will be available on the Wharf Avenue Yachts YouTube channel for anyone to see. Also, all the other dive-ins with Captain Sean are there as well. You want to know about the Arctic, any place else in the world? Yeah, it is available. The internet never forgets, so." It will be there. Does anyone else have any questions before we wrap it up? Nobody. Maybe they're not. Maybe they will pop up. But Will, do you have any final thoughts?
Other than Indian Ocean is an extraordinarily beautiful and exciting destination to explore, I appreciate the opportunity of speaking with you and your audience, and obviously we're here and happy to help and answer any questions on that journey.
And thank you.
And happy birthday.
It's my birthday. And we've got someone that wants to go tomorrow to Mozambique and Tanzania. Just want to say, this is again, this is part of a 2-part series, maybe 3. I mean, Africa's so vast. At some point, we'll love to have you on and talk about different parts of Africa. We're going to be live at the Palm Beach Boat Show with Cooks and Adventures, which you know, Will, those guys. We're going to be talking about the Comoros and Madagascar live. So if you're at the Palm Beach Boat Show, swing in. If you have any questions, that would be great. And on an upcoming diving with Captain Sean, the return of Billow. If you'll remember him from our Thailand presentation, Bill O'Leary will be back. We'll be talking about the Southeast Asia Sea Pilot, which I am a contributor of. I wrote the section on Vanuatu, but Billow for 30 years has been writing about Thailand, writing about cruising in Thailand. This edition will be the digital edition, first digital edition of the Southeast Asia Sea Pilot, which I recommend if you don't have it, get it. We have a question. This is wondering. It says, Dan asked, how can one get in contact with you for a potential charter trip? Well, you can always contact me, Sean at wharfavenueyachts.com. Email me there or call the Wharf Avenue Yachts Newport office. Will, how does one get in contact with you? Tell us that. I mean, aside from going to your website, Journeys by Design, but why don't you tell us what your email address is?
Sure. So yeah, my email address is will@journeysbydesign.com. But obviously very happy to be working alongside Sean. So if it was directed to Sean and Sean contacts me, we can work together on it. But yeah, feel free to reach out if you've got any specific questions. Be happy to help.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody out there. We'll see you next time. We'll stay backstage, and we'll see you next time on Dive In with Captain Sean. Have a great day.